Thinking Basketball Podcast. My name is Ben. Welcome back. It is that time of year. Everyone out there listening, all 12 of you, the Thinkies, the defensive awards that we like to hand out. Cody, I've lost track. Is this like the 5th or 6th? This might be the 6th annual Thinkies that we've done. I can't even quite remember. I think it's your 3rd time at the rodeo. And I think the first couple years we did this, there was like a torture. There was a pain to it that overtook your life for the period of scouting that leads up to you having to submit your ballot and go through this process. But I believe this year you've leaned into the pain and you are ready to go. You don't know what the results are yet. I don't know what the results are yet. We're gonna reveal them live on it. Like there's an envelope that an AI put together for us, and we'll get to them in a second.
I think the issue the last couple of years, because this is the 3rd time I've done this. It's incredibly difficult. This is the hardest podcast of the entire year to prepare for because defense is just, there's no great metrics to discuss how good somebody's hands are, basically. And I used to be afraid that people were going to judge me, that I'd listen to people be like, if you think this, then you clearly don't watch basketball. Like someone was going to tweet that at me. But now I'm like, if somebody actually thinks that after this episode and goes through this exercise, they know how painstakingly impossible it is. And just like, if you know the exercise, you know it's impossible, right? So we're just doing our best to try and triangulate and see what we can come up with. And I just hope people appreciate the work that goes into it. And I apologize if I leave your favorite player off.
A huge thanks to everyone who participated as always. As Cody said, we want as many eyeballs on this as we can get. And yeah, it is, I think the goal here, as always, is to kind of capture the year in defense, if you will. We were frustrated with the fact that they only have these 2 silly all-defensive teams. I think they should have more than 2 all-defensive teams. They only have the 1 Defensive Player of the Year award, and kind of the rest of basketball, from accolades to highlights to awards to 99% of the stats are offensively based. And we got to give defense some love. So that's what we're going to do for the next hour today. We have some new categories. We've consolidated things. We've tried to make it match up with what's happening in basketball over the last few years. We've taken your feedback over the last few years, both from the people who submit the ballots and from you listeners out there, and we've cut it down to 6 categories. Those categories are best motor, best hands, best point of attack defender, best perimeter defender, most versatile defender, and finally, Cody, the best picture, the what do they say, the coup de grace, the big kahuna, the best paint protector. It's the high value real estate on the basketball floor. When we go through, we'll talk a little bit more in detail about what the definitions are and what those things encompass, like what they actually ask of a defender in terms of their responsibility. But I think without further ado, we should jump into the technical awards. Let's start with highest motor, also known as the Hodek Special, Cody's favorite category, perhaps. He talks about it all year on every podcast. And I have to say, Cody, when I went to do my ballot, I started with highest motor, and I immediately had a panic attack because I found myself thinking, Cody has said this guy has a high motor. I feel like you've said that like 20 times all year. And every time I make a video or go through something where we're doing podcasts and things like that, I have all these little notes in my head. This guy's a really high motor. And then I saw that category and I couldn't think of a single human in the NBA that had a high motor.
Wait, you're saying there's a particular guy that I've brought up multiple times? Is that a high motor?
No, I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying you kind of earmark a ton of players as we go from teams through players through coaches. It doesn't matter what we're talking about. It's kind of like a little aside. You're like, when we do the Thinkies later in the year, I'm going to bring him up for highest motor. And I realize next year I should probably write down who those players are so I remember them. Any thoughts before? Yeah, go ahead.
I just think this one was really difficult in terms of, I thought there was going to be like 3 or 4 guys that were for sure going to make my ballot, especially from a particular team. And I just feel bad that I think I left every single one of them off. And now the more I think about it, I could be wrong. Like I'm just going to say I could be wrong for every single category, but there's a lot of guys that I've said nice things about their motor throughout the year, and they didn't make my ballot. And I don't know how to tell you what differentiated it in terms of what I'm looking for, but I don't know. This is a really tricky one to go back to who I thought would make it, the guys that I did earmark, and some of them just didn't make the final cut. So I'm interested to see what the others said.
This was the second most diverse of all of the categories. Excuse me. We had 16 different players that were on ballots in some form or another. And the highest motor here, as we're defining it, basically is who moves the most and who is the most active defensively for most or all of their defensive minutes. So some players have a high motor on offense, and some players have a high motor on defense, and some players are both. But this is the Thinkies. We only care about the defensive awards right now. So who moves the most on defense? Do you have anything else to say before I reveal the 2024 Thinky for highest motor? We always talk about, like, if we had the little statue, what would it look like? Would this be an engine with a basketball on it?
That was the first thing that came to mind. I love that, like a huge engine. I was going to say other parts of a car, but whatever you think my knowledge is of like football and baseball, it's so much worse for cars. I think instead of just saying the winner, you should maybe do like the top three. Like start with number 3, go to number 2, go to number 1.
Oh, you want to do a countdown like that?
Maybe we'll say like 10 seconds or a minute or 10 minutes on each person and just make this a 10-hour podcast.
I see how it is. Yeah. I see how it is. The thing is, I thought about doing that, but there was a 3-way tie for 5th.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, skip them. Let's just go to third then. Can we do third, second, first?
Well, I think what we typically do, we'll do 3, 2, 1. We'll talk about the winner, and then there's all these other players receiving votes that some of them are interesting to talk about. So okay. I think that's kind of the format we'll follow. So the tied for second, there was a 3-way tie for second.
Oh.
In motor.
Oh.
Between Alex Caruso of the Chicago Bulls.
Okay.
Jose Alvarado of the New Orleans Pelicans.
Yep.
And this one's interesting. Drew Holiday of the Boston Celtics.
Huh.
Yeah. That one surprises me a little bit.
So I got to say, actually, 2 of those guys didn't make my ballot at all. The one of those 3 guys that did make it, Jose Alvarado, right? I just think in terms of like the backcourt defense, like he does this little special where he sneaks up on people, and he's one of those guys that you hound people full court, like 1-on-1. That's something that a lot of players can do once in a while. But he hounds people from like behind full court, and you can never be like too sure that he's out of the picture. And he's so small and quick and skitterish that I just gave him some bonus points for that. Like he plays it all 100 feet of the court. He didn't make number 1 for me, but he was in my top 3 for the ballots.
He was second last year. Last year, if you remember correctly, the Thinky went to Jared Vanderbilt in this category, but he's kind of off the radar because he's been injured for the entire season. So the 2024 Thinky, the first Thinky that we're handing out today, this is so exciting. I'm so glad we're doing this. The 2024 Thinky. It might not even be his only Thinky he wins today. From the Orlando Magic, Jalen Suggs.
Hey, number 2 on my ballot. This is a guy that, I mean, with his size, he kind of has the Alvarado thing, but with his size, nothing is safe. Like, if you go in transition, he's a little bit behind you. He's going to try and injure himself. Like, he's the only person that's injured himself multiple times this year blocking a shot. As a 6'5" guard, he will go over his own teammates. He will hit his head against the backboard. He will do anything to try and just grab that extra rebound, block that extra shot. I think to be really like high in this category, you kind of have to have no self-preservation with your body. And I get the sense that Jalen Suggs, and we talked about it with the bench press segment, he's a strong dude, so I think he can take a lot of physical punishment, right? And I think that helps him just kind of really put himself out there all the time.
I wanted to put all the Orlando Magic as my ballot, but ended up not doing that. I tried to spread the love. I think there's going to be one other category that maybe 1 or 2 other categories where the winner doesn't get quite the same vote share. So this was a little under 50% of the possible vote share to Suggs, which comfortably wins him the category, but it's a plurality, not a majority, if you want to get into fancy counting terms. Let's talk about some other players really quickly who came up. I joked about the entire Magic. Anthony Black, we've talked about his motor throughout the year. Jonathan Isaac, for a big guy when he's in the game, has a great motor. But other players on this board, I see a lot of Knicks also receiving votes. Josh Hart, Isaiah Hartenstein, that guy's bouncing all over the place. Colin Sexton, Gary Payton II, Herb Jones, Mikal Bridges, Asar Thompson, Matisse Thybulle. Boy, I wonder who voted for Matisse Thybulle in this category. Cody, can you who do you think? Do you have a suspicion? Well, we'll move on. KCP, Najee Marshall, Lou Dort, and Derek White split a vote. Someone was like, I'm just going to give them. There you go. That's your best motor.
Out of those names that you just said, is there anyone that you want to particularly shout out from that bunch? Because I like all of those guys. I think the Knicks, I always liked, when they were kind of at full health, I thought the Knicks bench mob was super high motor. Like they would whip out, I don't think you said DiVincenzo, but I thought about him for a second. Josh Hart, of course, Hartenstein, like all of these guys, even quickly when he was there, like it was just, you brought them in. It was just a lot of high energy that was coming in off the bench. And I don't know if more minutes brought that down a little bit, but I kind of thought that all of those guys would be competing for number one more. But yeah, Jalen Suggs, like we said, just outshines them all in my mind.
I struggled a little with the Knicks in the sense of like, should there be a ton of players on there, or are they all kind of just like B-plus motor guys who are getting a Tibbs boost or something in our mind? But I do really think Hartenstein bounces around a ton like crazy, and I almost voted for Hart myself. He's right on the cusp. I think with so many of these categories, occasionally there's like a couple standouts, but then if you think about, you know, who's the 4th through 8th best player in the category, there's so many different names you could put in. So, all right. Shall we move on to...
Let's move on.
Best hands?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Best hands. The definition of this category, we're talking about the most accurate, disruptive hands in a short space, meaning we're reaching for the ball or we're targeting blocks or passes. This is not passing lane. We're not on the other side of the court using our length. We are taking our hands and we are stabbing at the basketball. And if we don't hit it, we don't kill the whack-a-mole. Is that how you play that game? You have to whack the... You know what I'm talking about? The game where you're at the arcade.
Kill the whack-a-mole.
Isn't that what you're doing at the arcade? Aren't you trying to whack the whack-a-mole?
I don't think we're trying to kill any. Like, there's nothing at an arcade where it's like, let's murder this innocent little critter in the ground.
That's not true. There's so many violent games at arcades. Clearly, you haven't been to an arcade in a long time.
Well, yeah, there's like the zombie ones where you have like the fake toy, but like there's no physical thing where it's like, here's a hammer, hit this Goomba sort of. Okay, tell us about the hands. I thought as when we entered this, I'm like, all right, Cody, you can't go too off track too many times. This is already going to be a big podcast, so I'm here to get us on the rails, Ben. Who are the hands candidates?
Okay, we had fewer total players come up in hands, and let's just jump to the top 3.
Yep.
Okay, so the third place in hands, and I love this. Oh my goodness. See, I'm seeing this for the first time right now. The names on here are amazing. Number 3, I love this call out. From the Houston Rockets, Fred VanVleet.
Hey, all right.
You know what we forgot to do in Motor? They're gonna remind us. We forgot to talk about who got first place votes. Yeah. Players with first place votes. Suggs, Caruso, Sexton, GP2, and Herb Jones. And I noticed that because Fred VanVleet is on a number of ballots, but he does not have a first place vote. But he does end up with the 3rd most vote share. That's how we like to do things around here. 3rd most vote share. Fred VanVleet. He finishes in 3rd. Second best hands in the NBA in 2024. Am I having deja vu? Alex Caruso.
Oh, okay.
Alex Caruso with the second best hands in the league. Alex Caruso won the Thinkie last year for best hands. Won the Thinkie last year for best hands. And the winner of the 2024 Thinkie for best hands in the NBA. From the LA Clippers, the Claw, Kawhi Leonard.
Oh,
he's back.
Won.
He won. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, he's back. And I might have been one of the people that voted for him first. Caruso, Kawhi, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. We're going to talk about that. And we also have to talk about, this feels like a Cody vote as well, Andrew Nembhard.
That was not me, actually.
Okay.
No,
Interesting. Interesting. A first place vote for Andrew Nembhard. So we'll talk about those players in a second. But I think I may have voted Kawhi first. I had him very high. Just a really good defensive season from him. And it's the combination of the activity and the destructiveness on ball and all the stuff we know. He's a little older. He's a little heavier. This is not peak defensive Kawhi, but he had a really good defensive season. And I think one of the things that I noticed when going through his defense and then also like figuring out who am I stacking him up against when I make a best hands ballot, oh man, Kawhi's hands are very big and they're very accurate and don't get the ball near him. And there's kind of like an impulse to say, is there anyone else who has scarier hands when you're near him? I don't know. So I like this. I like Kawhi Leonard here.
He was number one on my ballot, too. And my thought process with that is I don't know if there's anyone that has the amount of strength out of a single finger than Kawhi. Like, if he gets that mitt anywhere near you, like if you go up with a shot or you're trying to dribble and he takes a stab and even gets like a tip of a finger out, it's over. Like, it's just done. And he has such good control with it and such length with it that he can kind of get it to himself really quickly. And that was I think his size actually helps a lot because when I was I sort of regret one of my votes. I think Fred VanVleet, I had third on my ballot. I probably should bump him second. I think Fred VanVleet has extraordinarily underrated hands, and I think he adds a lot of value under the rim with that ability. He's already a stout defender, but in terms of just like the size, I do think strength with Kawhi helps him out quite a bit. So, like, in terms of, like, pound to pound strength here, Fred VanVleet might have some of the best hands, like, the best hands in the league. But like I said, Kawhi is just, like, utter power that he brings with it kind of differentiated it for me.
I think the hardest cut for me, because he's not on any ballot here, I'm going to read the names in a second, was De'Aaron Fox, who is, like, near the league leaders in deflections and near the league leaders in steals, and he is disruptive. But I was, when you're stacking this up, you're like, how much of that is his hands being like these really sort of sentinel-like creatures that shoot out at the ball, and how much of that is his feet and like sneaking up on players or jumping into passing lanes or things like that. So it's really hard. I like the Fred VanVleet placement because of that. We can talk about Andrew Nembhard because I know you love yourself some rookie Nembhard, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was a tough one for me as well. I considered him on my final ballot. He is tied for fourth here with Nembhard. Shai is also fourth, and then Victor Wembanyama is tied for fourth in the vote share. Shai's interesting because that length and sort of his playmaking in that sense on defense is something that ties into the Thunder's success, where they turn a lot of defense into offense, and he's getting in passing lanes or kind of digging down from the nail a little bit. He does gamble a little bit too much, even on the steals for my likelihood, for my taste, but like he has the length to have a guy go by him, reach around and push flick it from behind, get the steal that way. He gets a lot of balls that way. So really interesting candidate. Glad to see him get some love in this category.
Can I shout out a guy that didn't get any votes? And in retrospect, I probably could have given him like my final sixth place vote or something like that. I just think Dennis Smith Jr. for the Nets. I think he's got a tremendous set of hands on him, and he's kind of a guy that floated around a bunch of different categories for me, and I think hands would have been the highest for all of them, but didn't quite get it. I think Andre Drummond is always really interesting with this. I think I voted for Andre Drummond in the past. I think he has a pair of pretty tremendous hands. I really like the Wemby shout-out, not on my ballot, but he is somebody that, again, with the absurd size of his length, I think he has the really famous dig from earlier on in the season. It might have even been in preseason where he like extends, it feels like 10 feet away and just karate chops and gets the steal. And I think that was one of the first times watching him where I'm like, oh, so this guy's just going to do stuff that other humans can't. So I think that's a really interesting shout out.
One of the things I love about doing this podcast and then doing the ballot this way is you get the diversity, you get the different perspectives. And well, I didn't have Wemby on my ballot. I was surprised to see him, and I certainly wouldn't vote him first. But it's such a great call because when he targets the ball as he's like spinning around with these helicopter arms, he's really incredible at finding the ball with those hands. And you're talking about a dig or a steal down low, but we wanted to capture the ability to hit the ball at different levels, passes that are being thrown into the interior. Draymond Green is someone who got a few extra votes on this ballot. And I remember years ago doing the first defensive deep dive we did on the Thinking Basketball YouTube channel into Draymond and watching how he tracked entry passes with his eyes and then would like nab them with his hands as they were being thrown. You're like, wow, the hand-eye coordination and the reflexes to do that is incredible. And I think that's exactly what we're looking for in this category. So Chris Dunn, Gary Payton II, Nikola Jokic, another perfect example, like someone who's amazing at that. Both he and Draymond do the thing where they like play the ball in one way, turn around to play a second defender, and swipe as they're turning around and hit the ball off people's legs constantly under the basket. Herb Jones, Jalen Suggs, and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, all the players receiving votes in this category.
And then, I think you could also shout out guys like Derek White and Drew Holiday and any of that, just normal guys that pop up. I think all of these guys have great hands. If you were to ask me what really separates some of these guys that you just said from them, I'm not really sure if I could say one. And again, my ballot with that. So I don't necessarily know. There's a lot of guys you could have said for this particular category, and I would have absolutely no qualms with it.
Shall we up the stakes a little bit, Cody?
I'm interested because you said one of the categories in a way that I did not interpret it when you were introducing them. So I'm really fascinated when we get to that category to establish if I just voted incorrectly.
You mean I read the description on the ballot and it was different than how you interpreted it?
The name of the category was actually different from the name I've written down. So I'm really fascinated to see what happens when we get there.
Is it, well, we're going to do point of attack defender next. Is that what it is?
No, let's do that one next.
Okay.
Let's do that one next.
Yes. So point of attack defender. And this is starting to get at a slightly broader skill set defensively. That's why I think the motor and hands are the technical awards of this award show, because those are very specific, but point of attack starts to involve multiple facets of defense. And the general idea we're trying to capture here is who disrupts offensive initiation the most. Who disrupts offensive initiation the most? And so that could be pick and roll, screen navigation and pick and roll. That could be individual defense where a team saying we want to get an isolation, we want to get a clear out, and you can take that action away. And technically it could even be if we want to get someone off ball, we want to run a little screen and a handoff or something. Can you blow that action up? So it's really the tip of the spear for an offense. Who can dull it the best? That's the idea.
And like you said, with whoever's kind of doing an isolation or running the pick and roll and stuff, what makes it interesting is it's not quite like a switchability thing. But I don't know about you, but I was kind of thinking about guys like, all right, who's going to be able to do the best at maybe Luka Doncic is the guy I'm trying to put you on. Maybe it's somebody like Stephen Curry is somebody I'm trying to put you on. So I was looking at the gamut of that kind of point of attack defender.
What do you mean by that?
In terms of I think when people say point of attack, it's a lot more point guard centric, but I think there's some guys in the league that are a lot bigger than a typical point guard, like a Luka Doncic, like a LeBron James, who are going to be running. And so I kind of skewed towards guys that would be able to do both really well, as opposed to just hey, who's going to shut down this point guard the best out of anybody?
Oh, yeah. No, this is not point guard specific. We are absolutely talking about all the different ways teams typically like to start an offensive action to create an advantage. That's the idea. So, shall we reveal the top three?
Let's do it.
Okay. Number 3, I'm happy to see him here. The categories, it's so hard to pick players, and I think I ended up having him on my ballot, but there's so many guys. Number 3, from the Minnesota Timberwolves, a favorite of this podcast. It is Jaden McDaniels. Number 2, Herb Jones. Now, I should say that last year, the winner, Jaden was in the getting votes last year. So it's nice to see him get into the, what do they call it when you get a medal in the Olympics? You get on the podium. It's nice to see him. Yeah. Yes. It's nice to see him get on the proverbial podium. The winner last year in this category for best point of attack defender was Drew Holiday. And the winner this year from the Chicago Bulls is Alex Caruso.
Alex Caruso makes
Yes, 60% of the vote share for Alex Caruso. He finished second last year. He takes it this year. Alex Caruso is a very good defender, Cody. Would you like to say words about him?
Well, I think looking at, let's talk about McDaniels and Herb as kind of like a package in just a second, because I think it's interesting. We have two guys that are, similar in terms of their build as opposed to a lot of these other point of attack guys. Caruso, to me, compared to those guys, is just better at screen navigation. I think he's a little bit better at getting himself small, fighting over screens. He's got a lower center of balance of gravity, so he can kind of take those hits, bounce off them, recover quicker. I think he's got a quicker acceleration. Like if he's getting around a screen, he can, speed it up a little bit more to catch up with the guy. And I think in terms of smaller types of guys who are maybe a little bit quicker, he's quicker side to side, a little bit better lateral speed. And the hands, we talked about the hands just a second ago in terms of him getting some votes there. And I think his ability to target in that way is just helps him out in that way. So he just kind of has all of these really broad skills. and he's probably equally good at defending smaller guys and bigger guys in terms of this sort of creation. I think about when they were playing the Bucks at some point this season. He was just guarding Giannis. They were just like, hey, you're going to be starting the possession on Giannis. And somebody that's going to be defending point guards and Giannis in the same kind of game, that's pretty incredible, especially somebody that's like 6'4", 6'5". So when you take all of that together, you just, in my mind, have he was number one on my ballot. So I very much agree with this.
He was number one on my ballot as well. Herb and Jaden McDaniels were the only other players to get first place votes. And I realize now that I've dropped the ball because the person who did not make the podium, I was just going back and forth with my first place vote between Caruso and this other player. And that is Jalen Suggs of the Orlando Magic, who you want to talk about a pair. You know, you said, let's talk about these guys in a pair. I think Caruso and Suggs are cut from the same cloth. High motor, insane screen navigation, completely give up their body, flying all over the court, and they're disruptive in so many ways. They're big physical guards that you want to throw that, like, you want to turn the corner on a screen and throw that like crack back pass, they jump in the air and take that away. You get stuck on a screen, they're going to stick their hand in. You go around them and they come from behind, they're going to block you. Suggs even more so, like rear view block. Is that Matisse Thybulle? Did someone hit a trampoline? You mentioned it before. He's going to injure himself on the play. Like, those were the guys to me that I don't think either of them, I mean, maybe it was your tiebreaker in terms of Caruso's size. I don't think either of them you're going to put on like 6'7" jumbo creators, 6'7" and above, big wings and sort of bigs who create a lot of offense. But my goodness, for everything else, even these off-ball actions, I actually think Suggs is a little more active at this point because Caruso's getting older and he's had more wear and tear, and there's only so much you can kind of put on your body as you age in these kind of roles. But there's just some possessions where he's like completely blowing up what the offense is doing by navigating the off-ball screen and just sort of moving his body in front of a guy and top locking him and preventing him from getting open. And then there's like, oh, we don't have, let's go to our backup action. And then that backup action's terrible. And then that guy tries to cut in the paint and, you know, Suggs rolls over and it's a turnover. It's just, it's all beautiful stuff.
I'm thinking about a Caruso play. I don't remember who they were playing, but he's kind of peeling off his defender to go recover back to the perimeter. And the guy that's driving is trying to throw a pass, like, kind of over where Caruso's already recovering to. Caruso, in his like running back to the perimeter to defend him, just without looking, throws up this hand, just throws it in the air because he's like, I wonder if the pass is going to be here. Guess what? Guessed perfectly and gets the steal out of it. Like, that sort of instinct is something that helps him a lot. And I think this is an interesting discussion between Suggs and Caruso because when you ask me about them and you say differentiate them, I think maybe I gave Caruso the nod because Suggs is surrounded by such defensive talent that maybe it didn't stand out as much. Caruso I've seen for years surrounded by guys who are just not the strongest defenders, so every time I watch the Bulls, I'm just like, look at this guy go. But when you watch the Magic, it's like, oh, great, I switched, Suggs isn't on me anymore. I guess I'll take Anthony Black off the dribble, and I guess I'll drive in and see if Jonathan Isaac's hanging out down here, and Franz Wagner is just hanging out at the nail right now. Like, there's so much going on defensively that maybe it just tamped it down a little bit for me because he didn't make my podium. He was on my ballot, but he wasn't in the top three for me. But I buy the whole they're very similar types of defenders premise.
Did you see the play that I sent you today where Suggs was guarding OG Anunoby and he tried to back him down?
No, I didn't watch this.
What's going on? This is like a play specifically made by the basketball gods for you. See if you can pull it up while I describe it. OG Anunoby, who's an enormous human being, right? He's backing down little Jalen Suggs. And now I'm turning into Bill Walton. Little Stevie Nash. Little Jalen Suggs. Okay? Do you see the play? Suggs just like spins. It's like grappling. He like spins off his leg, gets his hand in the cookie jar, gets his hands on the ball. OG Anunoby cannot lift the ball up. Suggs rips the ball away from him like he's a little boy taking his ball. It's just insane. Yeah. Anyway,
that was
need to
awesome.
Recover.
How would you then, shifting to the two other rangy wing defenders, how would you differentiate the guys like McDaniels and Herb Jones? Like, they ended up 2 and 3. So would you really say there's much of a difference for them, or how would you describe the way that they play defense in similar and different ways?
The similarity, I think, is in the the style and what you were talking about, maybe they're a little less effective getting around screens. I think McDaniels uses his length a little bit more. He kind of plays angles and length a little bit more. Herb weaponizes his hands in those situations, and Herb's hips are probably stronger. So yeah, they're very similar in some sense, but also very different in how they use their physical build. I kind of struggled with what to do with both of them in that sense, just because, again, like, do you put these players first? Are there 10 players in the league better than them? I don't know. Let's list some other names that are on here. Drew Holiday, Andrew Nemhart, Gary Payton II, Anthony Edwards. I want to come back to him. Chris Dunn, Derek White. I was like, who's White? I was like, what's that guy's name? Derek White, OG Anunoby. I want to come back to him. Trey Murphy, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and shout out for Lou Dort. So I'm happy to see Anthony Edwards get some love on here.
Talk about him.
I think this element of his defense is probably underrated. You know, we can talk about awareness, rotations, pure paint protection as a wing. We can talk about that kind of stuff, but he has point of attack possessions that are, for lack of a better word, just sexy as hell. They are just like, have you seen these possessions where he just locks in, moves the feet, uses the strength, the tools, pretty good at screen navigation in some of these situations, and he just engages and blows up a play. It's gorgeous. And his defensive numbers, I think his defensive EPM is very high this year. Like, he's a pretty good defender. And I think getting some kind of tip of the cap acknowledgement here, for me, was pretty cool to see. Yeah.
So I want to talk about Edwards for a second, because I think when you grow up and you're playing basketball and like your coach has you slap the floor and you say defense, you pull up your shorts, there's something, it's like a power up, right? Like you do that and all of a sudden like your defensive capabilities just improve tenfold. And I think nobody has a bigger gap between their typical defensive possession and their slap the ground, pull up the shorts defensive possession than Anthony Edwards. Like, I'm pretty sure if we were just judging, I'm slapping the floor and I'm locking in this point of attack possession, Anthony Edwards might actually be the best player in the NBA at guarding somebody one-on-one. Like, when he turns it on, I think it may have been a Paul George possession I have in my mind. And I know there's plenty of other possessions, but there's a particular Paul George possession I'm thinking of where he just like can't even get inside the three-point line. Like, Edwards is absolutely in him. He's strong as an absolute bull. So he's kind of like got the Drew Holiday squat team sort of thing where you just can't get through the guy, and he's going to be in your face about it. And I think that's actually where he dropped off for me a little bit, is if he could ramp it up all the time. Like, maybe we see it in the playoffs and that's just constantly how he plays defense. Sure. Then he's like an all-time point of attack guy. But I just don't see it consistently enough as opposed to somebody like, McDaniels, who I do think Edwards is probably better in those high-end cases. But across the board, McDaniels just brings it every single possession.
I just want to say, Cody, I'm a little bit hurt by the lack of Asar Thompson in just this whole show. There just should be more. I know you're going to say he's a rookie and he's got all. I know what you're going to say. I just want to say I'm a a little bit hurt by that.
I have him written in 3 categories with a question mark.
Yes,
So I'll tell you that.
I did the same thing. The other guy here, before we move on, that I wanted to mention, that I think I'm trying to scan here. I think I probably had him higher than anybody else. A really interesting player in this category, and we'll probably get to him more, is OG Anunoby. He's kind of in this getting extra votes kind of range when you look at the final results. But not only did I struggle with what to do with him because he's so diverse and he does so many different things defensively, but have you seen him like get around picks and just like, here's an element that we haven't talked about that I take into account that I think is very important. Who does your coach deploy you on? Right? Does your coach put you on the best point of attack guy on the other team? Go back to Jaden McDaniels. Like Herb Jones, it's the same thing, but it's not necessarily as extreme with Herb Jones. For instance, they play the Clippers. Herb Jones doesn't start the game on Kawhi or PG. Later, I think he picked up PG, right? But he doesn't start the game. The Timberwolves, just one night to the next, they're like, who's your best player? That's where Jaden McDaniels is going, unless it's like Nikola Jokic. Okay, like we're just going to take him. We're going to start with McDaniels, and we're going to work our way downstream from there. OG is the same thing. OG will guard all kinds of guys if that's where your offense starts. And that was a really compelling factor for me. Also, I think if you look at like the the fancy second spectrum pick and roll data and stuff like that. Like when OG's guarding the ball and pick and roll, I think he's played on 2 teams this season, but combined across both of those teams, they're giving up some of the fewest points per possession of anybody who's guarded like 500 pick and rolls as an on-ball guy. And that matches up to the film because he's so strong. He's such a pain in the butt. He can do so much. So I thought he might get a little bit more love in this category, but certainly really interesting player. I mention Trey Murphy the third, right? I said him?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe you did. I don't know. But with OG, I don't want to push back a little bit. I think all of these guys are incredible defensive players.
On me or the voters? You're going to push back on me?
Just a little bit on you, I think, here. In terms of, I'm thinking of like the 76ers game where he was playing against them, and he guards pretty equally both Embiid and Maxey earlier in the season. Like, it's incredible to be able to switch between that. But I always thought when he was guarding somebody that's smaller and quicker like Maxey, I wasn't always quite as impressed. Like when I think about those other rangy 6'8", 6'7" types of forwards, I thought McDaniels was better at getting around screens, at getting a little bit smaller. OG's just carrying a little bit more weight. Like, that's a bulky dude, and that helps him in a lot of different kinds of matchups, but it also hurts him. Like, it's a double-edged sword in terms of his build. So, while he's a tremendous point of attack defender, when I'm coming down to like my top 6, I just voted for guys like Chris Dunn over him, whom I wish was getting a little bit more love. I think Chris Dunn's a just phenomenal point of attack defender and somebody that you can't make a pocket pass when he's around on the point of attack because he's going to get it. But I just think that bulk takes away some of that agility that's necessary from OG.
Yeah. Once again, I value the versatility, though. I think what you're saying is not something I disagree with, but just that the versatility to go do those things at a B minus level when other players can't. You just don't see all the other players take those assignments because they can't do it. Fun OG Anunoby stat for you, Cody. It's skewed. It's skewed by the fact that he was traded. It's just kind of funny because he's only played 660 something minutes with the Knicks since the trade. But when the Knicks have OG on the floor, they are 15 points better defensively per 100 possessions than when he goes to the bench this year. Fun small sample stat. Anything else to say here before we move to the next category?
There's just a guy that we need a little bit more gauntlet love, Ben. I don't know what I need to do for my voters to get a little bit more gauntlet love.
More gauntlet love?
I'm feeling a little hurt that he has no podium finishes right now because he has multiple podium finishes on my ballots. But I guess maybe I'm watching differently. I guess people are seeing some other things that I'm not.
I actually think he's clearly a half level down from where he was a couple years ago. I think age and injuries and things like that make what he's doing slightly less effective. You get the great length, you get some of the hands, you get some of the great possessions, but I actually don't think he takes the assignments. Remember, he's shorter than a lot of the guys we talked about. I don't think he takes the assignments or shuts down the actions quite like some of these other players. And frankly, Warriors fans, cover your ears. I think if he did, they probably would be a better defensive team when he plays. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I still think a half step down for him is podium finish.
Well, half a step down. He used to make a lot of podiums, and now he's in the also receiving votes category. So I think that's consistent. For the gauntlet.
That makes me sad.
Yeah. Let's do perimeter helper.
Okay, good. Okay, so when you said it earlier, you said perimeter defender, and I was like, oh no, I was doing perimeter helper. So this is good. I feel better about what we're doing.
Did I say perimeter defender earlier?
Maybe you didn't.
Tragic.
Maybe you didn't. Maybe I misheard something. Maybe I just wanted to catastrophize this for a second. But we're on the same page. I feel better about life right now.
Well, let's clarify. This is a new category. It is a consolidation of other categories. It might be my single favorite category. It is best perimeter helper. And the idea here is not best perimeter defender. The idea here is who is the best at getting in passing lanes, zoning up the weak side, and thus, again, playing a passing lane or cutters? Who's the best at coming from the middle of the court, the nail foul line area, digging down, then recovering, stunting toward the ball, and basically helping from the edges of the court, not the paint, from the outside of the court in? That's the idea. Best perimeter helper. I think it's a huge part of modern basketball defense. And yeah, you have anything to say before we get into the first ever best perimeter helper award?
Let's do it. I'm excited about this one.
We have a three-way tie. This one is just all over the place. This is totally all over the place. The vote distribution here, this is our most diverse category. We had like 18 different players get votes. It's a lot. Many a multi-way tie for third.
Okay.
The players tied for third: Paul George, Drew Holiday, Andrew Nemhard, Jonathan Isaac.
Whew.
All tied for third. We're gonna talk about these guys in a sec.
Wow. Okay.
Second place in the best perimeter helper award. Here he is again, Kawhi Leonard. And first place with the smallest plurality, just 31% of the vote share. This thing is like every ballot is different. Oh wow, look at this name. From the New Orleans Pelicans, Herb Jones wins best perimeter helper.
I don't even know what to make sense of. Do you want to try and make sense of just all of the names? Why do you think we voters went ahead and just threw all these names at you? What makes this category so tough to pin down?
I think it's a very broad category, especially if you aren't thinking about it as you go through the season. Like that's why I want to shine a light on this category. And it's hopefully something that we put it in the ground now, we declare it, we codify it, and going forward, we have a little bit more clarity. So in theory, in 5 years, if we're still around doing this, then you say, okay, like you might hear more people in the basketball sphere say, this guy is an amazing perimeter helper because of how he plays the passing lanes, because of his ability to understand weak side zones, and who's better at digging down and disrupting the game than this guy. Frankly, the player I had in my head for this category, based on the conversations we've had in the last few Thinkies, the last couple years, is Jason Tatum. Because of how good he was as sort of playing off ball. But remember, those Celtics were always trying to have like Rob Williams or some shot blocker closer to the basket. So Tatum wasn't necessarily doing that. And for me, when I came back around it to this year, I believe I'm the only person who voted for Paul George with my number one position, because Paul George to me is in a way like the epitome of this idea. That guy is so good in passing lanes, and he is so long and so disruptive when he's not guarding the ball. He's actually plenty good guarding the ball. I wouldn't have been shocked if he came up in one of the earlier categories that's more on ball oriented. But if you think about like an action where Paul George is on the weak side, a team runs pick and roll on the strong side, you create the 4-on-3. Now Paul George is the only man on the weak side. So you're either zoning up two players or you're leaving your guy to like tag the roll man. You can go through I've seen a lot of Clippers defensive film this year. I'm not sure there's anybody better at that specific action in the league. And then you combine the fact that like Paul George is also a very good disruptive defender, but it's that kind of role. And I think it's something that's hard to clarify in your mind if you're not thinking about that as you watch sort of the second side or the periphery of an offensive possession.
Here's what I'm imagining. There's two kinds of things that I'm imagining in terms of when I'm trying to pick a player for this. Number one, it's the ball swinging around, and then this player ends up sort of at the nail to play defense, right? Sort of hanging around the free throw line, is able to make plays from there. That's the first thing I was thinking of, kind of a nail defender, so to speak. And the other one is, how good is this player at playing, splitting the difference, right? Like behind you, I got two guys, and I'm going to be able to cover both of them. Like no matter who the player skips to, like I'm either going to be able to recover to, steal it, or completely prevent anything else from coming from. And you're right, Paul George is very good at it. Again, just a very long list of guys. I just think, I had Jonathan Isaac for number one here. And I think this is a guy that you don't even necessarily think of him as a perimeter dude, but if he's anywhere near the action, I think he completely blows it up, and I think he kind of turns away some things so you just don't want to pass anywhere in his vicinity. In terms of squaring up two guys behind you, like you pass to one guy, it doesn't matter. He'll cover all of them at the same time. And it's like, all right, you get that pass. I'll kind of stand here and not even allow you to make that extra pass to the corner because I'm just going to defend you, contest you, and prevent that last second pass there. And so I voted Isaac number one here because I think of his ability to span so much square footage in such a short amount of time.
We also have Alex Caruso, Jaden McDaniels, Matisse Thybulle, Contavious Caldwell-Pope, OG Anunoby, Jalen Suggs, all the greatest hits. Derek White, Lou Dort, Gary Payton II. And here, okay, now we land on two more guys. I already mentioned one of them. Jason Tatum, Mike Conley also got a vote, and Jimmy Butler as another guy, I think especially in the playoffs, is extraordinary at this. Extraordinary. I think, let me check my ballot. It all starts to blur together and glaze over. Yeah, I did not end up putting Jimmy Butler on the ballot. I think if this were like a playoff-centric thing, I think if you had asked me last year, I probably would have him up, like fighting for the top of my ballot because of the exact skill set that we talked about. Just like sitting on the weak side, splitting the difference between two guys, eating up space in the passing lane. Oh my goodness. How many playoff players are better than Jimmy Butler at that? So yeah, a lot of different directions you could go here, but I also love seeing some of the point of attack guys that we've seen. One of the things is when you watch the Jalen Suggs highlight reel, the defense, which is very long, it takes a very long time to get through the Jalen. Like if you go to the NBA's website and you pull up all of Jalen Suggs' steals, you'll be there for a while. And they come in many different varieties. And so you will also see these like leaving your own man to go into this space. But I don't think it's just the playmaking for me. This is what I was alluding to with Paul George. I think Butler does it. There's a deterrence to this kind of defense that's so important because you can't make the skip pass. There's a deterrence to this kind of defense because you pick up and tag a roll man. So the Lucas of the world can't just hit that for a layup. And it's quietly happening. But when you have, especially younger defenders, when you have defenders that aren't as aware and aren't as disciplined and aren't as smart about basketball scheme, you get those layups. You get those open threes. When you have the very best at it, not only does it go away, but that's when you also get the like, wait a second, what? He stole that? Yeah. So this to me is the most interesting category.
You were just, Jimmy Butler. I think you're absolutely right, and it would have been different if we voted last year. I just think he looks appreciably slower, maybe less interested, less engaged defensively.
Not enough coffee.
Not enough coffee, not enough playoffs. I think Jimmy Butler's like, let's go to lockdown again. Like, that's where we need to go play our playoff basketball because I'll be ready to roll. But I just didn't think he looked anywhere near apex Jimmy Butler. Maybe he'll switch it on in the playoffs. Maybe that's something he'll be able to do. But again, this is a guy that's getting up higher in age. Something that guys like Suggs and some of these guys are so good at doing is when you see somebody, you make the skip pass. People like Suggs are just... They're so good at jumping to try and steal the pass, and yet they're jumping at an angle and contorting their body that if they miss it, it doesn't take them out of the play. They like land like a cat in a way where they're already closing out. So they kind of combine this like backwards, like I'm doing a backstroke flip turn sort of thing. And like if the pass gets through, it doesn't matter because I'm just landing and I'm already in the closeout. So even if you start driving, like I have the proprioception to be like, oh, I'm right here, you're right here, bam, I'm shutting you down. Like there's nothing you can do with this sort of drive. So I think that's a skill that I'm starting to see a lot of these guys really starting to master more.
I'll give you another element. You just landed on it that makes this to me the most fascinating category. The speed of your closeout as you recover to a pass, and then sort of the containment of your closeout. I feel like there are too many guys in the league, but I think that maybe I've been watching the LeBron JJ Redick podcast too much. There's too many guys in our league, Cody. I feel like there's too many guys in the league who, when they close out, give up that blow by too easily. Mm-hmm. And you'll probably see, we talked about this on a Twitter NBA Spaces with Timberwolves assistant Mike Inori talking about typical teams will have like one coverage, which is run that guy off the line no matter what. Okay, so that's like, Steph Curry, never leave him open. And then you have like, you want to close out to him as a shooter because that guy's a pretty good shooter. And then you want to close out short because he's not a good shooter. So you definitely don't mind giving up the shot, but he can drive by you. And I just feel like there's too many guys in the league who are in this situation that we're talking about. The pass comes over the top, they close out, and they're just, I don't know, they're like at the beach. There's just like the hands are up, they're just going through the motions. That's part of this, not giving up those. When you see someone who can play that pass and like not give up that closeout, that shuts off the advantage that the Lucas, that the SGAs of the world, that those superstar players just created.
And you look at guys like Herb Jones, who you said Herb won this category, right? Like he's number one here.
Did I say that? Is that what happened?
I think so.
He
I think
did.
you said,
He did win this category, yes.
So you have guys like him, and I think Isaac's in there. Obviously, Paul George, any of these guys that just have ridiculous length. Matisse Thybulle is so good at blocking three-point shots. But you have when somebody gets the ball and they're like, oh, you know what? I can take the spot up three-point shot because this person's so far away. But then they get up into their form and like halfway into their shot, they're like, oh my God, I'm about to get my shot blocked. Like I have to kick this out. I think that's an element of it because you're deterring that sort of shot. And the play that like Herb Jones is having, these are very rare basketball plays. I think not popularized, but like the first play I think about is Jeremy Evans, the pogo stick. You know, you block the three-point shot so hard that you send it down to yourself on the other end of the court to get a dunk. I think Jeremy Evans's ended up with a poster dunk that was probably like in 2014-ish range. Herb Jones had one of those this season where he had some kind of spectacular play earlier in the play, but then like he's in the paint and somebody's taking a shot right at the top of the key and Herb's like, you know what? This is mine. Closes out, blocks the shot, and gets himself down to get the dunk at the other end. And when you're able to close out that ferociously, that's such an important element to it. I think closing out is a place where a lot of these guys make so much of their value on defense.
Are you ready to get to one of the heavyweights?
What do we have two left? We got two left, right?
Another new category that we've combined from other categories, from the feedback over the years. I think we had something very similar last year. We had most switchable defender last year. Bam Adebayo won most switchable defender last year. But this is something that we've been building to over the years. It's most versatile defender. Most versatile defender. And the idea here is who can succeed in the widest variety of coverages and guard multiple positions if necessary. So we want to take into account your ability as a defender to play these different coverages, which means physically you need to be able to do it, but also mentally you need to be able to do it. You need to understand positioning. You need to understand scheme. You probably need to communicate a little bit because things are changing, especially in a playoff series. And we've seen this in the regular season now because basketball is so high IQ, so competitive from one night to the next. Hey, we only have a short period of time to put this walkthrough in. We're going to switch to this coverage. We're going to switch to a coverage that we don't run that much. Combined with, you got to guard multiple positions because that's what's going to happen when we start changing the scheme up. It's the opposite end of the sort of like very rigid, I think of a great drop big man who that's all he does, right? Like it's great, it's fantastic, but we're kind of stuck when we start saying, let's play up at the level of the screen or start switching. We lose a lot of your value precisely because you can't do the things that I just outlined.
I mean, that's what happened with the Milwaukee Bucks at the beginning of the year.
I didn't want to say it, Cody.
But I mean, it's the truth. Adrian Griffin's all like, hey, let's try playing like intense hedging defense. But you have Brook Lopez out there. So I think there's this thing where your style dictates how you have to play. Whereas with these versatile guys, you allow the coach to be like, you know what? What if we just tried this? What if we did this for a couple possessions? What if we come out of this timeout and do this sort of thing? And if this player allows you to do that at a high level and basically throw out any scheme, those are the kinds of guys that are most versatile. Whereas switchable, I like that a lot more than switchable because that's just like, hey, how many individual guys can you take like one-on-one? This is how many different schemes can you take while still playing at a very high level?
Yeah, the goal this year was to really try to capture the value-driving elements of defense. That's why I love the best perimeter helper category because I think it's the biggest value-driving element that we don't notice as much because it's often happening on the periphery of the court. Same thing here, not just switchable, but all the other things we talked about with coverages. So, third place, the 2024 Thinkie for most versatile defender. Third place is last year's switchable winner, Bam Adebayo.
Okay.
He takes third. Second place. This is wow. I can't believe this is happening. I have a bone to pick here in a second, but I can't believe this is happening. Second place, For most versatile defender, Cody, from your Orlando Magic, Jonathan Isaac.
Yep. Saw that coming.
Are you looking at these results? Or
No.
Okay.
No, I'm looking at my own ballot. I'm looking at my ballot.
Okay. And the winner, the winner of the most versatile defender, the 2024 Thinky, the first ever Thinky. You want to say something?
Has to be from the Warriors, right? Is he a Warrior?
The winner is from the Golden State Warriors. Yeah, okay. Draymond Green, 64% of the vote share. I think I might have voted him first or second. I can't remember. I definitely had him on my ballot. I'm happy to see this, even though I think Draymond's about half a level below where he was a couple years ago. He's lost a little bit. He's still a great defender. He still has great defensive possessions. He still makes great defensive plays. And he's certainly somebody who captures the spirit of this concept with how many different positions he can guard, how switchable he is, how versatile he is, how he communicates, how it feels like in the same possession sometimes he'll play every possible basketball coverage and run a gambit himself that no one else knows is coming and somehow come over and make a play. So I think a well-deserved debut Thinky from an old graybeard defender, Draymond Green. I have more thoughts, but Cody, I got to let you jump in here.
This is the same players in the top three that were in my top three of the ballots, so I feel good about that. But I did have 1 and 2 switched around. I had Draymond Green number 2, and I had Jonathan Isaac number 1. I thought a lot about Bam Adebayo in this one because I think he, year after year, sort of is allowing Spoelstra to unlock his mad scientist genes. Like, it just allows Spoelstra to be like, okay, we're going to run this kind of zone. We're going to have this weird amorphous zone matchup man sort of thing, and none of it really works unless Bam is Bam. And I think that's the true magic of Bam Adebayo, is he kind of function in all of these, and it doesn't matter if he ends up on an island with a small because he's one of the best straight up switchable defenders in the NBA. I just thought in terms of Draymond Green that Draymond's just a little bit better at basically all of these in Bam. Like, they're both very similar in that respect, but I just thought Draymond was another step up. But Isaac, Ben, I don't know where you had him. I just think, I don't know, man. I just think he's just an offense buster. Like, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I had him on my ballot. Well, I had him on my ballot. I completely agree. I ended up in the same place with Draymond and Bam that you did. I was like, well, he's just a little bit better at all kind of similar stuff. I had Isaac on my ballot. I wasn't quite sure what to do with Isaac because I think the awareness or that Draymond sort of communication, identification of threat level thing that Draymond has in his brain is not quite there with Isaac. But are we at the point of the show where I can drop hot takes so that aggregators... most shows have aggregators. We have agitators. They just get very mad at what we say. Jonathan Isaac moves like peak Kevin Garnett defensively.
Wow.
He's just like a weird, like he's 7 feet tall. I don't care how tall he says he is. How tall do you think he says? Like 6'9" or 6'10" or something?
He's not 6'9".
He's like 11 feet tall. Okay. And the way he moves and bounces around, the movement patterns and the length and the timing of shot blocking and playing different things, it's very similar. And of course, Garnett's obviously one of the great defenders of all time. And I mean, we just talked about Draymond. Garnett's threat recognition system is one of the most insane things I've ever seen on a court. So I'm not making a one-to-one comparison. I want to be clear there. But I wasn't quite sure what to do with Isaac because I think having not seen that in the playoffs, having lacking the actual, like, okay, what happens when you like tax him and ask him to play different coverages? And then even the switching component, man, he's a really good switch defender, but, you know, can quick guys get by him? Is that a vulnerability if you tried that a lot? I wasn't sure about those things, but also he's a human wrecking ball out there. It's ridiculous, the defensive possessions he has, and I've mentioned it before, the Magic have the best defensive rating in the league let me say this even better. There is no player in the league that has been on the court this season and had a lower defensive rating than the Magic have with Jonathan Isaac. And I think this is very much the reason for that, because he's just insane in this part of the court.
So one thing for Draymond in terms of why it makes sense that he's number one is the communication and just knowing what's coming from the offense is another level. It's just a step above anyone else that you'd see defensively in the league. Like you see it with guys like LeBron, and you see those old stories of like Rajon Rondo calling out plays. Draymond Green is very much the same sort of thing where it's like, oh, this coverage is going on, I'm going to set the chessboard. You don't quite see that as much with Isaac. And I guess the question then is, how much is that recognition and being able to move all the pieces, how much value does that actually bring out, as opposed to just being whatever Isaac is out on the court? Because you're right, like, to me, I just put him number one because all I know is when I watch basketball, Ben, there is nothing like Isaac like I've seen in years. Like you said, KG, like, sure, that's probably the last time I remember watching a defensive player in every possession. I'm like, I don't understand how this guy is equally in all of these places at one time. So just off the absurd excitement of watching somebody play my favorite side of the ball like Isaac, I just had to put him number one. But again, in terms of like, if you really value being able to direct everyone on defense and know what's coming from the offense, I think the Draymond number one pick makes a lot of sense.
Funny Isaac story, Cody. I went to rewatch some of his possessions in trying to figure out what to do with my ballot. And I was watching, however it is on NBA.com, like a ton of his defensive possessions, like who he guarded and who so I was watching like all of them. Mm-hmm. And there were so many good plays. I thought I had selected his steals and blocks. And I was like, wait a second, I don't want the highlights. I want all the plays. Oh, no, that's just what all the plays look like with Jonathan Isaac. Okay, before we get to the best picture, the paint protector, the granddaddy of them all, this like highest value real estate spot, I have a bone to pick here.
What do you want to talk about some of these other?
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
That's my bone.
Okay. Sorry.
My bone.
I got excited.
These are all great choices. This is fantastic. I'm not really pushing back per se. I'm picking at the bone. I ended up going with Anthony Davis number one for two reasons. One, he's having an incredible defensive season. We might talk about that more in a second. Two, is he not the ultimate Swiss Army knife in this area that we've seen in the last few years where, like, what can he not, what kind of defensive scheme can you come up with that you cannot put him at the center of the attention of the defensive scheme? He makes the entire thing hum, and it shuts down the opposing team.
Well, I just think with Davis, if you ran a switch everything scheme, I just don't think he's nearly as good at that as, say, like Draymond Green or Bam Adebayo. And Davis on my ballot is fourth. So those top three guys you said, I got those three, and then I have Davis because I also think he's an incredible jackknife on defense. But in terms of the lateral quickness, yeah, he's great for his size. But when I compare him to these other couple of guys that we just said there, he has a lot more value rim protecting. He's incredible at dropping back and preventing any sorts of passes, and he can stick with a smaller guy once in a while, but I do think he'd be quite a bit more vulnerable if he was forced to, every single possession, switch out onto a perimeter player.
Sure, but that's only one part of the equation. I mean, he's so much better at drop coverage than some of these other players. Do you not think he could take, I mean, of course, famously in the 2020 bubble playoffs, he guarded Jimmy Butler. Do you not think he could switch on to wings if that's what the doctor ordered? I mean, I just feel like the last 2 years alone, going through the Lakers playing in playoff tournaments and then the in-season tournament, the Tyrese Halliburton scheme, the weird, like, Golden State Warriors, we're going to play on the other side of Steph Curry and Klay Thompson because we're just going to try to have Anthony Davis roam in the lane. Oh, Anthony Davis can roam off you. He can guard your best player. Maybe you could make the argument that he's not quite as good guarding the best big men in the world. But I mean, I think compared to these guys, are they going to do it better? Maybe Bam might do it slightly better if you're just narrowing in on power players like Jokic. I don't know. I just feel like in a sense, he is like the ultimate cheat code.
So I think I'm thinking last year. So, maybe he's a step slower, Draymond is, from last season. But there were times where the Warriors playing the Blazers, right? They're playing the Blazers at some point.
Who?
The Portland, back when they had Damian Lillard, now Milwaukee Bucks legend.
Okay, all right.
Where they started possessions, and the possession was, Draymond, you are on Damian Lillard. Like, that was part of their defensive system and scheme against him. You would not do that with Anthony Davis. There's not a time you would start and be like, Anthony Davis, you're actually going to start this possession on Jamal Murray, and then we'll have everything else going on around you.
No, you wouldn't. But I think one of the more fascinating things about AD, and this is what I'm getting at, you saw it in the in-season tournament final, AD would not guard Tyrese Halliburton. AD is just the person responsible for destroying all of Tyrese Halliburton's actions out of the pick and roll. That's the difference. It's like, no, AD wouldn't guard Dame Lillard, but however Dame Lillard liked to attack pick and roll, like if he's getting that pull-up three, AD would come up to the level of the screen, take it away, and then also figure out how to take away plan B or something like that. So there's a reason why this is one of the heavyweight categories. There's a lot of right answers here, and I think these guys are all great. Let's read some of the other names that came up. OG Anunoby, aforementioned. Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday this season. I mean, he's guarding centers. He's in the center of the zone that the Celtics will run sometime. When interviewed about that, I love this. When interviewed about that, he said something like, "It's nice to be able to try new stuff. They're really challenging me. I get to do new things here in Boston." Herb Jones, Victor Wembanyama, Alex Caruso, Aaron Gordon. Oh, I like that. Nice shout out to get some love for Aaron Gordon, who's like not really defensively, I think, at the level of any of the Thinkies that we've talked about today, but whatever the level of defender that is right after that in terms of versatility, switchability, strength. Gordon himself has talked about needing to become a smarter player after the Nuggets lost a couple years ago in the playoffs, and I really think he has on both ends of the court, just communicating more, things like that. I love this shout out. Derek White and Josh Hart.
Okay. On Drew Holiday, I think it was Paul George's podcast, and I think they were talking about defense at one point. I don't know if they were quoting Drew Holiday. I think it was Paul George, and I know Drew Holiday was part of it. But there was this quote where he was talking about earlier in his career, where he's like, I enjoy playing defense more now, because earlier on it was just kind of like, you're going to go guard the point guard or you're going to go guard the shooting guard. And now there's a lot more stuff he can do, and he's a lot more versatile. So, even though Holiday may have been more lithe and just like, a quicker defender, he actually gets more value because he gets to try out all of these weird things. And he genuinely likes to try out the weird stuff, and I think that helps quite a bit here. Can I actually talk about two names that didn't come up that feel sort of wrong? One of them, I guess, kind of makes a homer pick here, Ben, but I think a lesser Anthony Davis. I think Giannis probably could have got a vote here. I think that's a guy that if you have Giannis on your team, you can sort of run any sort of scheme. I do think he's a little bit less flexible than Anthony Davis in terms of containing ball handlers, but he's got the rim protection, he's got the disruption, and he's got the high motor. So I think that's a guy who can run a lot of different schemes with. And, I can't be talking like I'm angry at everyone. I didn't have him on my ballot. And then the other one, Evan Mobley. I feel like Evan Mobley is a name that probably could have got a vote from somebody. And again, I'm one of those somebodies that didn't give him a vote here.
I have written down at the edge of my ballot, Evan Mobley, ? And Giannis.
Same.
I do think the reason Giannis has been conspicuously absent, or maybe inconspicuously absent, I don't know how you feel at home, but I think the reason he's been absent is he is having a lesser defensive season from what I can tell from my eye. And to borrow your vernacular from earlier, I'll push back on you a little bit. I don't think the motor's been where it has been in the past.
Okay.
So I think that's probably part of what's going on. At the same time, this is not an offensive show, but my goodness, his offense has been incredible this season. So there's always that trade-off when guys get older where they're like, okay, you might see it in the playoffs, but in the regular season, I'm not just going to go absolutely ham on the defensive end, but I am going to, do my thing offensively and get into my groove. And he's certainly done that. Paint protector.
I'm so excited to see where we went with number one, because I think I have a feeling I know who number 1 and 2 are, and I'm so fascinated to see where we're going here.
This is the best paint protector. It is in many ways the best picture of the Thinkies. This is about altering or deterring shots at the basket. A little language I added this year, inspired by the NBA officials to get the gather into the rule book. Altering or deterring shots at the basket without fouling, because I actually think that's something that sometimes people forget, including myself. We are talking about drops or rotations at the rim. We're also talking about deterring shots, early positioning, taking charges count, verticality, and backline communication, because you are the backline of defense and you are trying to protect the paint. Best paint protector. Oh, my goodness. Number 3. This is where we need a little Cody drum roll action. Number 3, Anthony Davis from the Los Angeles Lakers.
There's your guy.
40% of the vote share, though. So we're getting some healthy vote share. Okay, even in the last category, AD got 26% of the vote share, which is about the same winner as the perimeter helper. Perimeter helper was just all over the place. Anthony Davis, yeah, go ahead.
Can we just talk about other guys instead? Can we save 2 and 1 for a second and just talk about anyone else that was on the list?
Because you think you know who 2 and 1 are? Is that why?
I don't know the order. I really want to save this moment because I don't know the order, but I think I know who 1 and 2 are, and I think I want to talk about some of these other guys.
Okay. Well, I think we will be revealing implicitly who 1 and 2 are, but I will tell you the other guys. The other guys on the ballot are Brook Lopez, Walker Kessler, your favorite, Jonathan Isaac, Bam Adebayo, Joel Embiid, Chet Holmgren. All right, let's go. Jared Allen and Draymond Green. I think that's I actually wrote down for this category just like 11 names, 10 or 11 names or something. And I think those might have been the 10 or 11 names, literally. That's incredible. I don't think that's ever happened in the history of the Thinkies.
Yeah, this is a really tough category because there's a lot of other names that aren't listed there that I think are great paint protectors that could probably get some shine. I know Ivica Zubac, I think he's a great rim protector. I think even Hartenstein out there is a good rim protector. We could have brought in Evan Mobley. It's interesting that Jarrett Allen has that there, but I think Jarrett Allen has been significantly better in the paint than Mobley. But I don't know. I think Embiid was a really interesting one because when I think about the playoffs, think about the Celtics series from last season, just completely shutting down the paint. Just no one is coming in here. Massive side. It's kind of got the Shaq thing where it's so tough to even get a step on him because he takes up so much space down there. I don't know. What are some things besides just like the typical rim protection that you are looking for in besides shot blocking, I should say, that you're looking for in the paint guy?
You just mentioned Embiid. Is that who you're talking about?
Yeah, I was talking about it.
I'm so glad to see him up here.
Yeah.
Because he was on my ballot. If anything, I think you could argue he's a little bit higher. He hasn't played. We didn't put any restrictions on games played. We don't do the 65 game restriction around here or anything like that. It's just your judgment. For instance, you notice Marcus Smart wasn't around this season. For me, it's a combination of him not playing for most of the season and him not really being relevant in a forward-facing playoff. He's just out. He hasn't played since who knows how long it's been since Marcus Smart last played. So you play 15 or 20 games and you're kind of an afterthought. Whereas someone like Jonathan Isaac didn't play a ton of minutes, but he played 54 games. He's been on the pitch count. He looks like he's going to be ready to go for the playoffs. He's a playoff weapon. We're excited to see it. So every voter just sort of was permitted to use their own discretion when it came to how much someone played. Embiid's played half the season, basically.
Can I ask sorry, keep going.
Oh, well, I was just going to say when he played, he's been fantastic. And I was gonna answer your first question. Do you want to slip another?
Oh no, answer my first question.
Okay, yes. So you asked about looking at things beyond shot blocking. I'm really looking at your positioning, how much you impact shots, how much you deter shots, how much you bother shots, how easy it is to finish over you. Are you fouling? Things like that, in addition to communication. So I think Embiid's awareness isn't the best of the best. It isn't the best skill that he has in this area. And of course, there's a little bit of agility. Sometimes he can be late or sometimes the motor's not completely firing. But man, his presence at the basket has just been like S-class basically when he's been out there. And so I'm looking at how often you get in the paint. Cody, little things. Rebounds. You know, a lot of teams, if you're not that big, you can stop the first action, but the putback's easy. I want you to stop the first action, and then if you're lucky to get a bounce, I want you to be like, I can't shoot it over Joel Embiid, or I'm kicking it out, or I try to shoot it over him, and it just goes horribly. And those shots aren't counted as blocks, because if you don't block it, it doesn't get registered. But we have tools to see things like, what's your field goal percentage inside 6 feet when you're guarded by this player? And another thing I look at is the on-off. What happens to the rim defense of a team when you're on the court versus when you're off the court? Without getting into like really detailed numbers, Embiid has one of the best on-off sort of rim profiles in the entire league. It's only been half the season. And I think he does this with, I like to look at backups and like other guys out on the court. I think he does this with a decent kind of defensive backup in Paul Reed.
Oh, yeah.
And whereas some of these other guys, they go off the court, like there won't even be a center, like if you're looking at certain other teams, what we'll get to. But okay, what were you gonna say?
Let's talk about a player that didn't make any of these lists that I think popped up in at least a couple of them last season.
Oh, okay. Before we do that,
yeah,
there's one other thing I wanted to get to that you said.
Oh,
I'm with you on the Mobley thing. If you look at the on-off, the sort of paint defense has been better with Evan Mobley on the court for the Cavs this year than it has for Jarrett Allen. And another component of this is the short mid-range. I think sometimes we forget. It's not as sexy. I think we forget that like 4 to 10 foot area, that area out to the free throw line, where some of these more diverse, rangy players like Draymond Green, like Anthony Davis, like Evan Mobley succeed. And if you actually look at the Cavs splits, when Allen's on the court versus off the court, the short mid-range defense is much worse. When Evan Mobley's on the court versus off the court, the short mid-range defense is much better. He's one of the guys that stands out in that category. So those are the kinds of things I look at. Another kind of notch in the feather for someone like Mobley.
And in terms of not sexy things to look at as well, free throw numbers, right? How many fewer free throws is the offense getting when you're on the court? And I know that's pretty rough, and I know you could probably get more granular where it's like how many free throws you're drawing from the short mid-range rim area. But if you're preventing a lot more of those free throw numbers, that probably has to do with your ability to stop players from getting those good kinds of shots.
Yeah. Okay. What was the other question you wanted to ask me before we get to the winner of this category?
So Jaren Jackson Jr., the reigning defensive player of the year, has actually the 2 reigning defensive player of the years, which you just brought up in terms of Marcus Smart as well, absent from all of these discussions. Care to comment on Jaren this season?
He was second in this category last year, best paint protector. Brooke Lopez won the category a year ago, much to my chagrin. Jaren, so I think Jaren has had an underrated defensive season in Memphis, which is an interesting thing to sort of reconcile with the fact that I think I overrated his defensive season last year in Memphis, largely because of fouls, largely because of body control and fouls. So as you said, this is something that Cody has been talking about, I think for just like the last 12 months since you really started getting into this whole concept. There are certain players, you look at a guy like Nikola Jokic, he doesn't have the highlights and the verticality to block shots at the rim, but he's constantly making decisions where he's like, I'm going to position myself in a certain spot. This team's field goal percentage might be a little higher because of how I position myself and because of my lack of shot blocking, but I'm never fouling on that play. I'm never giving them the super easy high value shot, which is the free throws. Someone like Jaren Jackson's like the exact opposite end of the spectrum. He is destroying shots. He's going after them. He is a very disruptive, incredible highlight vertical defender. But especially in prior seasons, I think he's been a little bit better this season. When you look at the fouling, I think we forget to incorporate all of the easy points that the offense scores because of that. And you should actually count that as part of what's happening around the basket. So his season, I think, has been lost in the shuffle with Memphis just not doing very well. It would be interesting to really do a deep dive and see if he's been better than he was last year, if it's just team context, because both from a statistical standpoint and when I check in lately, he looks very good. And I struggled, like just so many names, I just struggled to squeeze him in. And maybe that's the difference in this category, Cody. Maybe it's just like you got to be the best of the best, right? If you are not bringing the Jack Nicholson, Meryl Streep, if you're not bringing your fastball, then you're not getting nominated here. Maybe that's it.
Yeah, and I think he's carrying such a bigger load than he's used to on offense. Again, it's sort of like the Giannis thing. When you're doing so much more offensively, especially somebody like him where that's taking a lot more of the load of a role he's never had to play, I think that takes a little bit from defense. Let's give the people what they want, Ben. Let's give them number 2 and number 1.
The second place finisher with 78% of the vote share for best paint protector in 2024 from France.
Oh, he did go second. That's so scary. Oh, I actually know. Oh my God. I don't know. I didn't even catch that till I said it. You didn't reveal anything. Oh, this is the worst.
Victor Wembanyama is second with 78% of the vote share, and Rudy Gobert is first with 84% of the vote share. I really struggled with what to do with Wemby. I really, really struggled. There's arguably never been a force like him, although I think you could probably go through very different eras in the past and say, what does a young Kareem do to certain teams? What does a Ralph Sampson, Manute Bol, like what did certain players have that effect? But just in terms of the overall versatility and the range of the defense and the things that we see on defense and what he's doing to people's brains around the basket. I've used it multiple times in videos this year. That clip of the Washington Wizards' entire team driving into the paint, seeing him and saying, nope, someone else try it. It's like a merry-go-round. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like it, but I'm also able to recognize that he is still not that strong physically, so there's going to be guys that can bully him. There's going to be situations in the playoffs where he's going to be moved off his spots a little bit in terms of how he helps. And as cerebral as he is as a basketball player, I think he's still got a lot to learn in terms of picking up reads, awareness, things like that. So I wouldn't give him like an A+ in threat recognition either. I did not know how to square any of that because his strengths are just so extraordinarily rare.
I mean, I've been on record multiple times saying that Rudy Gobert is the best rim protector this century, and I think the list is pretty small. So it's a lot of the big names that you would think about, like Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett. Even Shaq is quite a good rim protector, even like the Jason Collins type season. As a rookie, I had to think long and hard as to whether or not Wemby like overtook that. And we can have a conversation at some other point about if this is Gobert's peak defensively, if this would compete with Gobert, if this was 2018 or 2017 or something like that. But the fact is, here in 2024, it absolutely was a tough choice. I ultimately put Gobert above Wembanyama, who I put number 2 on my list as well. And it's the same sorts of things as you, and it's sort of the same arguments I was making for Isaac. It's just you watch him, and it doesn't matter if he's not, calling out all the plays and knows exactly what's going on. The positional awareness isn't exactly great, but oh my God, is every team afraid of him. Every single player is terrified of going in the paint, and he can recover and make some of the most ridiculous like the only other players I can think about, like I'm thinking about young Hakeem. That's just like he's at the free throw line. Somebody gets past this guy at the rim. Wembanyama's there and just stamping it out of existence. And you're just watching it like 5 times. You're like, how did he do it? It's literally not possible that he made it there in that second. So the impossible amount of plays that he makes it so I really wanted to put him number 1. But I do think the positional awareness, defending in space a little bit more, I ended up giving the edge to Rudy Gobert. And it sounds like a lot of the other voters did the same thing.
Man, the Rudy Gobert on-off numbers around the paint for Minnesota when he's on the court versus off the court are just insane. It looks like an error or something like that. I'll just give you the raw numbers. Their team shoots 7% worse in the basket area when he's on the floor. And then, of course, the volume goes way down as well. So teams are averaging 31 points per 100 possessions at the basket when Gobert's on the court. To put it in perspective, the Spurs are giving up 42 points per 100 possessions, 11 more points per 100 possessions when Victor Wembanyama's on the court. That's way better than when he's on the bench. So on one hand, I'm like, well, okay, he's not single-handedly making them a great defense. On the other hand, I don't really think they have a lot of defensive talent, and I think they're in like the 65th percentile when defensive rating when Victor Wembanyama's on the court. So this is clearly a defensive player of the year candidate, and it's clearly value that's coming from this just absolutely mind-bending sort of presence that he has, both to make these plays and then to throw players off from even thinking about shooting. J. Kyle Mann sent me a video. It's Josh Hart grabbing an offensive rebound against the Spurs a couple weeks ago. And he has a layup and no one's near him. And he doesn't even think about shooting. And we both agree that it's because Victor Wembanyama's on the court and Hart just assumed that he was nearby. And I have never seen anything like that in, however many decades I've been watching basketball.
Yeah, I think you sent me that clip, and it's really shocking to watch the play because he has like a wide open layup and just doesn't take a second to even look. He gets it and throws it. I'm sure some announcer would be like, "That's 2024 basketball for you," but no, it's Victor Wembanyama basketball for you.
Yeah.
And if people are asking or wondering about specifics, there was a Knicks matchup recently with the Spurs where I'm thinking about Hartenstein kind of getting his body into Wembanyama and knocks him out of the picture for a second, and it takes Wembanyama a moment to like recover and get there. And I think there are some of those moments where you can really get into his body, and if you're able to move him a little bit and get his length out of the picture for a second, you can take advantage of that a little bit more. And I'd be interested to see it in a playoff setting. And that's all just stuff that Rudy Gobert is truly the master of. And if I'm going to crown you the king, I do want to see it a bit more because you talk about some of the titanic numbers Gobert's putting up. It's not an aberration because it's something he's done for multiple seasons. Last year was a down season. There was some of the injury stuff, new team and stuff like that. But you go back to the Jazz days, year in, year out, just putting up monster all-time rim protection numbers. So I think this is just par for the course for him.
Yeah, I think if you look at the top three, Gobert, Wemby, Anthony Davis, all having monster seasons, the versatility. And I mean, Anthony Davis has like a 7.5 foot wingspan. Wemby's an 8 foot wingspan. Rudy Gobert is a 7'9" wingspan. But Rudy is a little bit slower and stiffer. It's unfair because he's very mobile for his size. But those other two guys, they just bend and twist and flow in directions that he doesn't. And those two guys, I mentioned it earlier, are great at taking away the short mid-range as well. So this is where I get stuck contextualizing like, Rudy's rim numbers are crazy, but these guys also have tremendous impact on the short mid-range shots. If you look at all the kind of rim protection numbers we can look at, opponents shoot 8% worse against Anthony Davis in the last 2 years on shots inside 6 feet from second spectrum. If you do the same thing with Rudy Gobert, it's 9%. Like, it's hard to really get a massive signal that you pick one of these guys over the other. I ended up defaulting with you, Cody. I think Gobert's number and his overall value, his overall body of work this year was enough for me to give him the nod. I kind of don't know what to do with Wemby's weaknesses versus his extreme strength. I think Anthony Davis is having an absolute monster season. Probably some of the best defensive numbers he's had in a long time as well. So it's truly the heavyweight of all the categories. It's amazing.
There you have it. I think you should recap. I don't even remember who won anything. I kind of blacked out once we started talking about Wemby here.
I did. I did as well. Okay, so recapping. Yes, that would be a very good idea to recap, right?
Yeah.
Best motor. Jalen Suggs wins best motor. Drew Holiday. Jose Alvarado. I'm forgetting basketball players' names at this point in the show. Drew Holiday, Jose Alvarado, Alex Caruso were the runners-up there. The 2024 Thinkies for best hands. Did we agree these were going to be like a statue of a little mittens or something a couple years ago? I can't remember. Kawhi Leonard wins the Thinky for best hands. Alex Caruso, Fred VanVleet were the runners-up there. Best point of attack defender. Alex Caruso wins this category, 60% of the vote share. Herb Jones, Jaden McDaniels, Jalen Suggs, Drew Holiday, the runners-up there. Best perimeter helper. This one was all over the place. Herb Jones wins best perimeter helper. Kawhi Leonard, Andrew Nembhard, Jonathan Isaac, Drew Holiday, Paul George, the runners-up there. Most versatile defender. Draymond Green wins most versatile defender. Jonathan Isaac, Bam Adebayo, Anthony Davis, the runners-up. And best paint protector, 2024, Rudy Gobert wins. Victor Wembanyama, Anthony Davis were the runners-up there. That is it for the 2024 Thinkies. We made it. We did it. I actually blacked out at the beginning of the episode. I have no idea what we did or what we said or talked about. Cody, do you have any final thoughts before we put this one to bed for another year?
There's almost like a letdown when I'm done with this. This is such a fun and intense podcast to prepare for, and now we just have to look forward to the boring playoffs, Ben. No more defense focus.
Are you going to watch? Do you remember how to watch offensive possessions?
No, I guess I have to care about schemes and plays. All of a sudden, LeBron and JJ Redick are diagramming and explaining what a play is, and I'm like, man, just tell me who's out there deterring shots at the rim. Like, that's all I really want to care. I'm waiting for their defense episode. I'd love to hear who they have to talk about.
To support this podcast, I think it's patreon.com/thinkingbasketball. I've honestly forgotten at this point. There's no oxygen left in my brain. We've got some defensive stats at patreon.com/thinkingbasketball for our deluxe members. If you sign up over there, some of the things we talked about today, we have some additional content and all kinds of cool things like that. Otherwise, thank you as always to the voters, to the listeners, everyone who participated in this. This is the 6th annual, I think, Thinkies that we've done. And man, yeah, next week we're going to start looking ahead to the playoffs, previewing the playoffs, get serious playoff basketball. But until then, thanks for listening, and we hope you're having a great day.